What are the future prospects of our economy, and what will it look like when we recover? Joining me today are Sanjay Varshney of Sacramento State and Barry Broome of the Greater Sacramento Economic Council. Sanjay, how will the pandemic fundamentally affect the global economy?
You know, Scott, we've already seen the economic damage that has followed the pandemic, and not just in our country, but globally. Estimates are all over the board. We are estimating maybe a really negative Q2 and Q3, maybe possibly. But I think at the end of the day, everybody agrees that this is really not an economic recession. This is really a recession driven by the pandemic. And the financials, even before we went into the recession, were solid. And chances are that once we get past the medical issue, you would probably see the consumer return to the market in ways that may not be the same, but the expectation is that the economies globally will bounce back.
Well, I'm curious, have any of the impacts that you've witnessed thus far been surprising or unlike past economic contractions?
Yes, a few things. So first, when people start comparing the current climate and the economic crisis and the medical crisis and the financial crisis to what happened in the Great Depression era, they're not too far off, because the magnitude and the speed with which the economic damage has unfolded has never happened in our lifetime. So what we're experiencing right now is something that we've never seen before, and clearly is going to change the way we think about our lives, how we're going to be living our lives once we come out of this on the other side. How we work, for example, the workplace is going to change. The education industry is going to change. Literally every aspect of our social life is going to change for a while. And we have to hope that fundamentally that those changes are going to basically be mostly positive and do not set us back in ways that may be very hard to recover from.
Barry, I want to ask you, if we go back to early March, before the lockdown, tell us how the conversations you were having then changed from the conversations that you're having today.
Well, how we have them is different, right? So it's more online and digital, but really the things that are starting to change that we think will benefit Greater Sacramento is, you know, a lot of the corporate real estate presence that major employers required, we didn't even have in our community. You know, so a Salesforce tower, for instance. And now the conversations are going to be, well, if you work at the Salesforce tower, it takes you 2 hours to get to work. Now it takes you 2 hours to get to your office, because the Salesforce tower is only going to allow 2 people on an elevator. So now all of a sudden the tower project probably is less attractive than it was, you know, first week of March. And now 2-tiered real estate with parking and the ability to have a spoke and wheel process, where a lot of employers are telling me they're going to consistently rotate people now out of employment centers. So you may have 75% of your people working in an office, 25% of your people telecommuting. That will now be integrated throughout a workflow. So social distancing and the liability behind social distancing, the idea that there may be more pandemics in the future, that this virus could repurpose itself in some way in 6 months to a year and even evade a vaccine. All of that is shaping dramatically different the physical space at which companies are evaluating. And as they re-evaluate that, that tends to lean towards more favorable to a market like ours, which has the ability to easily house people, has 2-tiered, 3-tiered office buildings, not 30, 35 footers like they've been asking in the past. And then, of course, I think it's going to change the notion of the metro markets. One of the challenges in our region is right now major industry doesn't feel like it has to be in Sacramento. We don't have to be in Salt Lake City. We don't have to be in Indianapolis. We don't have to be in Columbus. So communities like ours, these second-tiered markets of 2.5 million people, have had a harder time getting on the radar. I think we're going to be more on the radar, but we're going to have to see how that unfolds in the next 6 to 9 months.
So do you have any sense of when our economy will get back to where it was before, or even what conditions have to be present for that to take place?
Yeah, I think there's two challenges. I mean, one, if you look at what, simple indicators that recover economies are things like leisure and hospitality. So one of the things that's dramatically different than this, where, once the market, usually there's some type of loss of confidence in the market, consumers contract, 2/3 of the economy's consumer behaviors. They have a consumer contraction like a mortgage crisis in 2008, and then everyone was upside down on their house. And then, of course, that created a big drag on the economy. There was a credit and capital crisis. So usually when you see those kind of economies recover, I've got my equity back in my house, I got a different job than building homes, my income's pretty good, let's start spending. And leisure and hospitality is a leading indicator of recovery, as is residential construction. I think the challenge for us as a community is I think leisure and hospitality is going to be a lagger. I think it's going to be the most disrupted part of this economy. So the normal things that lead in recovery are going to actually lag. So now in order to lead a recovery, it's really going to require things like digital transformation, which has been something we've been working on with our community the last few years. So I think the economy comes back more in the 4-5 year range than people are actually comfortable admitting, just because some of these economic indicators that lead recoveries are more disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. I think leisure and hospitality recovers at the point in which we have a vaccine and people have confidence to come back.
Sanjay, I'd ask you to react to Barry's comments.
Agree with a lot of the stuff he said already. Just a few more things I would add. So in a way, I think in Sacramento specifically, we often complain about the region being a government town, but actually in this particular instance, we're almost blessed to be a government town because our exposure to government, which is not contracting, at least currently, is really a big plus. Healthcare, which has a huge presence in the Sacramento region, the largest employers being Sutter, Kaiser, Dignity Health, these are all basically programs that are going to be expanding in the future, given that this crisis clearly has pointed out in the direction that we will see healthcare actually doing well. A few things to keep in mind is that while certainly we have seen a shutdown to specific segments of the economy, specifically that have to deal with customer interface, where the barber shops, the restaurants, the leisure and hospitality, as Barry was pointing out. But keep in mind, the entire economy has not come to a grinding halt. We still have a huge chunk of the economy that's open. So, we still have, for example, manufacturing and production still online. We still have folks that are considered to be essential, who are going to work or at least working from home. To a large extent, the technology industry has really been a huge beneficiary because you can see, for example, things that we never thought we could do from home, we are actually doing those now, and fairly comfortably too. So I think there are going to be winners and losers, and it will force us to basically reevaluate and reshape our lives, but all is not lost. I think to a large extent, even though we'll see the gig economy worker being displaced in the short term, we clearly are in a sticker shock, with the unemployment claims that are being filed with 30 million plus, that have already happened nationwide. But the expectation is that as people come back to work and the economy starts opening up fully, I think the confidence is going to return because this was not a financial crisis like the 2008, 2009. The banking system is not at fault. The banking system is very solid, very stable. The Federal Reserve and Congress have already put $6 trillion, almost 30% of our GDP, on the table to help everybody out. So I think once confidence is restored, if let's say we find a vaccine or we find some kind of drugs that basically have an effect on controlling the virus, you will probably see, I think, just like the post-World War II era, where you will see reconstruction, you will see basically dollars going into the right spots. Every time we have had Hurricane Katrina or we've had a 9/11, we really have found how vulnerable we are. And I think this time is going to lead to a lot more strategic thinking as to how to reshape the economy.
I'm curious, you talk about money going to the right places. And I'm curious, how would you evaluate the effectiveness of the government's programs thus far and where the money has gone to?
It's a great question, Scott. So, it's very easy to be very critical and start basically playing the blame game or pointing fingers. But here's how I assess the response so far. Within 16 days, this is the second fastest that the market has ever crashed from a high into a bear market. We usually don't never crash into a bear market. The only other time that's happened before is in the Great Depression era. The last time in 2008, 2009, Congress took more than 500 days to come up with a monetary response to put on the table to help people out and businesses out. This time, the same response took less than basically 4 weeks. So Congress has responded. The speed with which, in a bipartisan manner, they've come to the table to help both individual households and businesses out is highly commendable. The speed with which the Federal Reserve has acted, how quick they have been with everything that they put on the table is fantastic. Now, of course, there'll be glitches. And of course, there'll be, instances where the money did not get into the hands of the people in time. I equate this whole thing into the analogy that small businesses especially are going into cardiac arrest. They're waiting for the ambulance to show up. And oftentimes the ambulance is going to arrive late. And they might not basically get the care in time. And they might be completely priced out, and they will not basically return to business because there was just not enough time, right? But so some of that is going to happen. I'm sure there'll be examples of how, for example, there'll be some examples of how there was some fleecing of the dollars, right? We've already seen examples of how, for example, Harvard University and the LA Lakers ended up getting loans that they clearly did not deserve, right? And they should have never really gotten in the first place. But all that aside, if I have to basically grade the speed with which the response has been put on the table, I think it has been fantastic.
Wow. Well, Barry, I want to ask you, going back to what Sanjay just said about how sometimes the dollars don't go in the right places, and also talking about the comparison to the Great Depression. In the Great Depression, a lot of the programs were focused around worker support in terms of things like the WPA, the Tennessee Valley Authority creation, things like that. How do you rate the effectiveness of where the money is going, notwithstanding the speed in which it's been appropriated and approved by Congress and the administration?
Yeah, and I think a lot of as Sanjay is saying is correct, and I don't want to be an armchair quarterback, but just after the first round of PPP money came out, when I talked to Doris Matsui, one of the things that I recommended is we need more $1,200 checks than PPP money. So I think if you look at what happened in Washington D.C., if you got your PPP money and then you're told, well, you have to hold your employees for 8 weeks. You got it in 10 days, and then you had a stay order for 6 weeks. You already burned through the PPP money maintaining your workers at home. So now if you want to reopen, when can you reopen, and how do you reopen? And when a small businesses almost always exclusively rely on foot traffic and revenue. That's why you're seeing restaurants deconstruct the way they are so quickly. All these restaurants, relatively speaking, are thinly capitalized, requiring on robust markets together. So I think the federal government's done a great job. I do think the PPP made sense, but after it went out the first round and it looked like the pandemic was going to be more than a 14-day curve suppressing exercise, to me, I think we need to be thinking about maintenance income, which I'm not normally a fan of. But I would like to see a maintenance income plan for about 12 months nationally that helps people a little bit more like a WPA. I think the unemployment insurance with the $600 benefit was very smart. But so I think we've done a pretty good job. But timing a loan program with businesses that require recovered economies to thrive is tough. I hear they're now converting that to income. All the money's unsecured. They have no real recourse to get people to pay back. I agreed with all that. Liquidity, capital preferences were eliminated for banks. But in all honesty, I would not put another PPP out in the market. I would be thinking about securing people, fixing this pandemic, let the market recover, get into the 8-9% unemployment rate, and start working down to full recovery with the things we know how to do as a community. I want to give one more thought, because I never want us to feel great about being a government town. You know, I think it's great to be the state capital, but 1/3 of our economy tied to government. I think these revenue implications that are going on right now for the state of California, I mean, I think that's a 3 to 5 year hit. And I think you're going to see incredible stress on pensions. And since 2008, they never recovered the funding, to my knowledge, to the Cal States and the UCs. So, as the economy recovered, higher ed still didn't get funded properly. And I think these kind of big, deep impacts on the state government and the stress on pensions and long-term government obligation is going to create a different challenge for us than other markets. So it may have slowed our fall being a government town, but it's going to extend, I think, our recovery, because furloughs have to be coming. Other things are going to be challenging from the government side. And then now we're continuing to repivot the economy away from government to tradable sectors that can absorb people once they're upskilled into living wages and can move the economy more efficiently going forward.
Well, let's take that and imagine that you were not only whispering in the ear, but actually sort of winding up and pointing the leadership of this country and of the state of California in a particular direction. What 2 or 3 enhancements, if there was going to be another round of stimulus, in addition to income support, which frankly is surprising to hear from you, would you put into place?
I mean, I would put 1/3 of it into income support. I would put 1/3 of it into stabilizing governments like California, Sacramento, Placer County. I mean, when we come out of this, one of the things that happened, your hometown, Scott, in 2008, 2009 in Detroit, while Detroit was trying to recover, it was 31 minutes to get a 911 response call. So, I mean, Detroit was having a hard time getting ambulances to people. So we got to remember that the city, county, school service programs are an integral part of helping people be secure and recovering. So 1/3 in the people, 1/3 in the public institutions, and then I would hold 1/3 back for more of an industry model. And I think Sanjay would know better than me, but you're starting to see some stress on mortgages. So I'm a little worried about the strength of the capital markets if this pandemic does something tricky. And I think it was smart for Washington, D.C. to sit it out for a month or two to watch it. But I'd say, 1/3 of stabilizing Wall Street, 1/3 to every person in America that's been impacted, and then 1/3 to the public sector for stability and basic services, like mental health facilities and mental health services, which are going to be unprecedented in an extended 12 to 36-month job crisis.
Sanjay, I want to give you your chance. If you were whispering in the ear of the leadership and could get them to do exactly what you wanted them to do, what tweaks would you make if there was a further round?
So, Scott, I think in my opinion, like I said, $6 trillion has already been put on the table for the bailout in multiple ways. And that's the largest we've ever seen, like I said, in history. The question is, can we keep putting more money on the table and keep throwing the money at the problem without being strategic about it? So in my opinion, I think it's important that somehow we find a way to reopen the economy, because we cannot have the economy shut down forever. We cannot wait a year or two for this virus to go away, because that is simply going to basically set us back in ways from which we will never, ever be able to come back. So find ways to reopen the economy, which is systematic. And in my opinion, like I said, we have found ourselves to be extremely vulnerable with what has happened with the pandemic. We have taken globalization to the extreme, and we suddenly find that with a large service sector economy also comes challenges. So right now, the fact that we are very service sector driven, we're also taking a larger than proportionate hit to our economy compared to many other countries in the world. I would rather see the money be more strategically be placed. So for example, our infrastructure has been lagging. And we have all been complaining about that for years now and decades. We know our manufacturing has disappeared. We need to somehow bring that manufacturing and the supply chain back to the United States. The United States used to spend on average 2% of its economy in terms of the GDP on research and development. That has shrank to less than 0.5% now. So when we start basically dismissing the value of research, what it basically means to spend money on NASA, for example, or whether we want to spend money on the discovery of new drugs, in the last couple of years, the pharmaceutical and biotech industry have been under huge pressure in a bipartisan way for the drug pricing issues. And my point is, from a capital market standpoint, why would any biotech company want to spend its money on research that may not have a payoff immediately, right? Because it takes years for a drug to basically reach from inception to the market. So this is a great example of how we need to be strategic about R&D. We have to promote more R&D in the university systems. And I think, being part of the university system myself, and as Barry was pointing out, from the last round, for example, both UCs and CSUs may not have come back. I don't think they deserve to come back, Barry. I don't think the university system has done enough to adapt to the new realities. The professors teaching in the system that cannot basically be brought kicking and screaming to embrace new technology. This pandemic has forced a lot of professors to change their behaviors. They would have never done that voluntarily.
Yeah.
So I think our industries that are inefficient need to become more efficient, and that includes the education industry. You can't keep throwing money at the problem, and there might be places where we have underinvested, and those include manufacturing, that includes the supply chain, that includes national stockpiling, that includes holding people accountable, including the university systems, because they are a huge beneficiary of R&D dollars. We have no idea exactly how those R&D dollars play out in many cases, because like I said, many of these universities brag about how they bring in $500 million, in federal grants, but then what do they have to show for it at the end? Right now, we're going through a crisis, and you can clearly see that we need to be a lot more strategic about what industries we promote going forward in the future.
Well,
it's very interesting that you say that, and Barry, I want to give you a chance to respond to Sanjay's comments. Tie it to, though, you're always focused on the workers and the mismatch between the opportunities that you and your colleagues are bringing in and the workforce we have within the community, especially in those underserved neighborhoods. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so we built Measure U with Mayor Steinberg, and the frustration is we just went over our workforce training programs the last 3 days, them again. And I don't completely disagree with Sanjay, but I want to add a little color to it and go back to defending UCs and the Cal State schools a little bit. We're training people. I mean, most of our money is going to train people on how to write resumes, interview, and to do teamwork. And that we're teaching people how to write a resume that doesn't have any digital skill sets. I mean, a third of the people in the Sacramento community, they don't even have the financial ability to get to the internet. And now we're sitting here at home making our living off of an iPad, our Chrome tablet, and people disproportionately left behind of color, single mothers, veterans, they're at home without even the internet. So they're totally isolated socially and otherwise. So to me, things like getting rid of this digital gap on the skill side, because as Sanjay's saying, the restaurants are coming back, but you got to know how to operate DoorDash to work at the restaurant. You got to know what to do with Uber Eats. These manufacturing facilities will come back. They're going to be leaning towards robotics. You're going to have a digital skill set to work in a manufacturing facility. Only 10% of the people in our community have basic digital skills. And it was a big reason why 2008's recovery was the worst in the United States. So we need to pull these workforce programs out of these networks of nonprofits that teach people what they know instead of train people and upskill them for what they need to become. And we need to stop taking our horrific social biases. And when we look at people that are being left behind, instead of seeing them as a liability or seeing them as a constituency that we have to take care of with a safety net, we need to start to see that constituency as part of our economic offering and empower them for themselves and the community. And that's something we're going to come out of this downturn very demanding and hard-nosed about from a leadership standpoint. We need to get rid of the digital desert. We need to stop using rhetoric on digital inclusion. We need to get internet services, technology, and mobile devices in the hands of everyone in our community. And then we need to connect them to a modern economy like healthcare IT, food IT, fintech for banks, and they will be able to manage the skill set required to go into the marketplace. And then when you're interviewing, the number one skill to get someone out of poverty, according to the Aspen Institute, is a Salesforce administration certification. That's the number one skill
Barry,
to take someone out of poverty.
Barry, we're going to have to leave it there. It's clear we're all going to have to adapt. Thank you both. And that's our show. Thanks to our guests, and thanks to you for watching Studio Sacramento. I'm your host, Scott Syphax. See you next time right here on KVIE. All episodes of Studio Sacramento, along with other KVIE programs, are available to watch online at kvie.org/video.